Well, hello there, and welcome to this live broadcast. It's an open Q&A session on Heilkunst medicine, and a number of you have already submitted some questions. I'll be going through those in a moment, but if I could just ask, this is kind of a funny situation. I'm kind of talking to myself, talking to the camera, even though I know you're there. If someone could just type into the comment box that you're hearing my voice, I just want to make sure the microphone is set up and all of these things. And actually, I think there may be even a 30-second delay from when I talk to when you hear me. So I will just let time pass a little bit. I'm going to wait till we get to about that 30-second point after I made the request and see if I start getting a comment or two that people are hearing me. As I say, this is a very uniquely 21st century phenomenon where I could sit in a room alone but yet talk to many people somehow. And yeah, let me just check my comments here. So far, I'm not getting any confirmation that anyone can hear my microphone, but I will wait another half a moment or so, another shake of a lamb's tail, as they say. Okay, I'm not quite getting any confirmation. I don't know if that means my microphone is not working or I'm not sure what it could mean, but yeah, I haven't had anyone confirm that they can hear me. So I'm certainly not going to talk for an hour if my microphone is actually not on. Now it seems to be on according to my settings, but again, until I know for sure, oh, here we go. I'm getting confirmation. That is such good news. And now we can put the technology aside and actually just focus on what we're here to talk about. Okay, so as I was saying, we're doing a live Q&A session. So if you are watching live, then you can, if you're on Facebook or on YouTube, you just type a comment or a question into the comment box, and I will come back around to that, and I will include it in what we talk about. And if, likewise, if you may not be here live, will also be a recording, so you can still do that. You can add any comments or questions, and I will bring them forward into a future session. But let me set up my screen here. I have set up a series of questions that people submitted, and here it is. The problem is trying to think and talk intelligently while I'm also playing around with little technology buttons here, so it makes for a funny little moment. That's not what I want. How about this one? That looks good. Yeah, there we go. Let's go with this one. Okay, so now I'll go into some of the pre-submitted questions, and as I say, I'll keep an eye on your new comments as they come in, and I will fold those into what we're talking about. And I've grouped all the questions that came in together, like amongst similar questions and similar topics, just to make the whole talk flow a little more in a logical way. And the first category I created was around the overview of Heilkunst, or the basic therapeutic principles. And oh, the other thing I've done, just so you know, you all know your own name, but I didn't want to make any assumptions about who does or doesn't want to remain anonymous. So I just took the first letter of the questioner's name, and that's how I've identified them here. You'll certainly recognize your own letter and your own question, but I will just refer to letter M or letter A as a person. Of course, I know you're so much more than a letter. You're very interesting, dynamic people. But yeah, you, for today's purpose, you will just be called by a letter. So letter M started with the question, how is Heilkunst different than traditional homeopathy or from other modalities? And basically, I just have my own notes here. I can speak off off the cuff on that topic, but I just wanted to keep myself on track. The difference, the way I would start the answer to that question is that Heilkunst, in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger sense, it's a master philosophical framework, and under that framework or under that umbrella, is included every health modality. You can go anywhere from cosmetic surgery to nutrition to massage therapy to homeopathy to all the different health modalities. We could name 6 dozen just sitting here together. There's all kinds of them. And the modalities are important and interesting, and each one of them has a special role to play. Each one brings its own unique gift to the realm of therapeutics. But Heilkunst, this is my point here, is this master philosophical framework which really gives a structure and a formation to all the principles and laws of nature, so that when somebody is going through a treatment plan, we can actually progress in a very deliberate, logical, systematic way and know exactly what's happening. The thing I often think about as an analogy is when you go into the shopping mall and you come to the front area, and there's a giant map of all of the stores in the mall, and it's under plexiglass, and it's kind of organized by letter and number, so you can find different categories. If you want to find a certain kind of clothing store or a certain kind of electronic store, you can find the name of the store you're looking for, and then it'll show you on the map, and you can get there. Anyways, why I'm talking about shopping malls and maps is this is my image or my analogy of what Heilkunst is. It's kind of that grand map. So where in this analogy, where each different modality is like a one of those stores in the mall, and you have to find your way to how do you get to this one and what's next to it, and so there's more of an order and a rational process to where you're trying to get to and what you're going to find along the way. So rather than just the hodgepodge of trial and error where you never know, are we actually getting to where we're going, or is this the right way, and things like that. This is my answer to this original question. So what is Heilkunst? How is it different? Well, it's essentially it's not a modality. It's kind of the master thought process that all modalities take part in. Anyways, I think I've made my point in a couple of different ways there. And the other way of saying it, I'm just noticing in my notes again, is the this grand realm of all the modalities is really an activity of empiricism. We see what happens in the world. We try different things. We see what the results are. Like, this is just you and me living our everyday life. We just more or less most of the time we figure things out empirically. Oh yeah, this belongs over here, and I found this over here. Like, these are just empirical, matter-of-fact, day-to-day things that we observe and interact with. And the same with the modalities. They're kind of working at that empirical level, and they're just simply trying to provide solutions for particular health problems. So at that level, it is what it is, and it does good. It does good in the overall health scheme. But that on its own can't do everything that we need to do in healthcare. And that's where I say here, in the opposite pole of empiricism is the rationalism stream of science, and those are the things which kind of come from the higher capacity for human reason and reflection, and kind of seeing deeper into what is the underlying principle that's operating. Let me give an example from physics and science, where rationally speaking, we can kind of understand the deeper law of gravity, how it works, and what that constant is, and what its mathematical relationship. As an empirical level, you can't say things to that rational degree. All you can identify is the fact, like the facts of life, that, oh yeah, this apple fell from the tree, and I dropped this over here and it fell down, and like, you can make these observations, but that in itself isn't enough to give you that deeper principle. So that marriage between empiricism and rationalism is really where all the modalities kind of come underneath that Heilkunst umbrella, which is kind of a rational principle umbrella. So we can go much deeper into that, but I just want to kind of give a general indication here, a general sketch of the territory and how that works. So yeah, so let me see. So let me oh yes, and even to continue on this one further point in this question, the letter M asks the difference between Heilkunst and traditional homeopathy, and to be more specific at what that means practically, now that we have a bit of that framework, the the homeopathic remedies, in the traditional sense, how those are used, how those are still used, those are treating a given symptom picture. Someone has a particular kind of headache. It's on the left side. It's throbbing. It has this characteristic or that characteristic. The person has other sensations in their body. You put all that together, and you get what's called a symptom picture, and that is what the homeopathic remedy is being matched to, and what it's treating. And so that's good at that level. We can get rid of that headache, get rid of those symptoms, but more deeper, like this is getting deeper into the Heilkunst understanding of medicine, and homeopathic medicine brings us into homotonic remedies, where the homeopathic, as I say, are those symptom picture. The homotonic are where we're treating either a specific a cause of a specific disease, or a specific trauma, or something at that level, and it may or may not be displaying in a symptom picture. Like it may just be kind of under like below decks, under the surface, where it's disturbed the life function of the person, but it hasn't necessarily manifested in a particular symptom picture. Sometimes it does, and then actually we can be dealing with both the homeopathic and the homotonic remedy at the same time. But in traditional homeopathy, to finish off this question by letter M, is that we, I guess I'll put it this way, a lot of the traditional homeopathic approaches, they only believe in following that symptom picture approach. And while it's good where it's supposed to be used, it actually misses this whole other homotonic dimension, and you don't actually end up with a deeper cure of the whole case and what's going on with the person. So you may get rid of that person's headache, for example, but you're not getting rid of the cause of the headache, which will come back again, or some other symptom picture will come back, to express it in a different way. So that's as I said, that's a rough sketch, but that's a really good kind of thumbnail sketch to keep in mind of what this is about, what the differences are, and what the thought processes are behind the different modalities. Okay, so now we move to letter A, and actually I have at least one or two other people embedded in here within this bigger question. So letter A asks for a reiteration of a basic overview of Heilkunst. Okay, and again, I will keep it fairly basic. This could also be a 2 or 3 hour lecture just on its own, but I will stick to more the sketch, the outline, and what that looks like at a practical level. So one of the most basic structures that we're dealing with when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to therapeutics, and this, by the way, what I'm about to talk about in these points is not specific just to this whole Heilkunst approach. And again, back to what I said earlier, Heilkunst is this master framework which applies to all modalities. So really, this should be the first thing that every healthcare practitioner learns in school. Now, most schools of thought don't think this in this particular way. They don't understand this framework. I mean, they understand they're part of it. They know how to teach their modality. They know how to put new practitioners out into the world and be successful in that particular modality. But this would be my great wish for the next generation of healthcare, is if we could see more and more of a true integration based on understanding these three jurisdictions. So anyways, that's my big wish. This is the big idea behind this, that it's not just Heilkunst, but it's really all of healthcare where this should be applied, this thought process. But now let's get a little bit into the details of this. We have the three jurisdictions, as I said, and they're named regimen, medicine, and education. And just to give you a couple of points on each one, what is going on in each one and how are they different from each other. The jurisdiction of regimen, is the therapeutic principle anyways, is what's called the law of opposites. And that's when we're dealing with in regimen the basic principle of balance. We can talk about if someone has a balanced diet, a balanced lifestyle, balanced between mind and body, or these kinds of things. When there's any kind of therapeutic need, if something is out of balance, someone is not feeling well, something is not functioning or whatever, then in this jurisdiction, what we're determining is what what is either the source of a given imbalance, or what may be kind of interfering with someone's natural life function that's creating that imbalance. And again, there can be 10,000 different examples here, but we're just wanting to grasp at the principle level that this when there is an imbalance, we're dealing with regimen. And again, we all know about diet and lifestyle and being balanced. So we know that let's even take the most basic, people who want to take a multivitamin and things like that. They don't want to be missing any essential vitamins or minerals. They're kind of being driven by this thought within themselves that if they don't want to be missing something necessary, they don't want to have too much of something. And it's I always think of that, what's the children's story, is it with Baby Bear, where it's not too hot, not too cold, but just right? Well, he was a master of the law of opposites in the realm of regimen. He was just trying to get that balance point. And again, as I said, we can go into 10,000 different details amongst regimen. I mean, so many of them just from living your life as it is, what it means to eat a healthy diet and all these other things, the right amount of exercise and all these things. But yeah, those are just all the details. I just want to stick more to the level of the principle here, because the principle is often what people don't kind of have in front of them. They're just kind of, back to what I said earlier, the empiricism versus the rationalism. People are generally living their life at an empirical level, feeling what they feel and having the results they have in their life, and what feels better, what feels worse. Yes, we do have a deeper rational understanding of things, but we don't tend to put that in the forefront. As I say, we tend to live our life from that empirical basis. So that's a little bit of my emphasis today, to bring a little bit more of that, the rational principles of things, more into the forefront. So anyways, there we are. We have the jurisdiction of regimen. Now, if we go into the jurisdiction of medicine, now we're going to get strictly into the area where we're using homeopathic remedies. So anytime anyone talks about, I'm using a homeopathic remedy, I have used one, I'm studying homeopathic remedies, all, like, what are they talking about? Well, we're in this second jurisdiction. It is the therapeutic medicine. And here, where, as opposed to regimen, which was based on the principle of opposites, now we're getting into the principle of similars. So if you've heard of the law of similars, the law of homeopathy, or if you've heard the expression like cures like, well, this is what we're talking about. We're in the realm of medicine, and this is what it's all about. Now, before I open up my little my bullet points here, this whole idea of like cures like, what that means really specifically when it comes to the homeopathic medicine is that the remedy that is prescribed for a patient, or I should say a little more exactly, that's prescribed for a specific disease of a patient, because the patient, we're not curing the patient, we're curing the disease. That's a little bit of a technical hair splitting, but don't worry about that. But yeah, we're applying this homeopathic remedy, which in which the natural characteristics of that given remedy are very closely matched, very similarly matched to whatever that disease state is in the patient. Now, that may be a disease based on symptom picture, like I said earlier. It may be a disease based on other factors, and actually we'll see those when I open my bullet points here. But whatever level of disease it is, the one and only way to cure it is through that similar remedy. The medicine which has that very similar characteristics as what we're treating. So let me get a little more specific. Now, under this category of disease, we have many subcategories. So we have diseases which can be homotoxic, pathogenic, homogenic, iatrogenic, ideogenic. There may be another category or two. I just put this together quickly this morning, so I didn't necessarily have all my points right at my fingertips. But for the purposes of today, yeah, we have especially these four categories: homotoxic, pathogenic, homogenic, and iatrogenic. That really plays into the whole modality that we practice under Heilkunst, which has to do with sequential trauma therapy. When somebody's had a broken arm, a car accident, an emotional shock, all of these kinds of things which kind of disrupt our life force, these can and often do become some level of disease which stays in our system. And then when we come around to the therapy, we use the understanding of these subcategories to treat those specific shocks and traumas. The fifth one here, the ideogenic, is not so much a trauma, but it's more has to do with, you can say, the whole realm of faulty beliefs. We're, the old expression, if somebody's looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, well, they're looking through a distortion. They're not seeing things accurately. They either have some positive or some negative spin, which is taking them away from direct understanding of what is actually going on in reality. So, anyways, I'm saying that as a very simple example, but yeah, that's a very broad realm. That whole ideogenic, we can talk about, the mind-body connection, and how certain beliefs can kind of cause illnesses in the body, and kind of goes into many different areas. Anyways, I just wanted to set this one apart. The ideogenic is not within the same subcategory as these first four, which these first four would relate to specific timeline remedies, but this fifth category would not. It's a different level of disease. Regardless, disease is disease, and so we're still in this realm of the law of similars. So now, to augment that a little bit more, and actually I was just mentioning this a couple of seconds ago. Letter M asked, can it be used to resolve significant trauma? I've cut this out from a series of questions, and was also asking about other questions about Heilkunst and the different remedies and things. So this can it be used? It was just the generic it of Heilkunst, like the Heilkunst treatment and Heilkunst modalities that we apply. Can those be used to resolve significant trauma? And as I outlined here, yes, there's a very specific approach to the treatment of trauma. It has to do with these four categories, as we said. And I meant to define it a little more. Let me take a second. The homotoxic, just like it sounds like, those are diseases caused by exposures to toxins. Pathogenic is all kinds of infectious disease, virus, bacteria, fungal infections. That's the realm of pathogenesis. Homogenic are specific shocks and traumas. A head trauma, like an incision. If somebody gets a cut, either accidentally or deliberately, such as they go to have an elective surgery, there's still a cut which causes a homogenic disease. So actually, and that reminds me, that's a big thing we do, not only in the timeline, but when we get into real life, people are just living their life and going through Heilkunst treatment, and if at that time they're thinking of going for a surgery or something like that, something where they know there's going to be incision, we'll give them the remedy before the surgery, rather than wait for them to just happen into it and then say, oh, by the way, this happened. So we can do that before. Yeah, so back to M's question. So to resolve significant traumas, as I said, these four subcategories are all different possible types or subtypes of trauma, and we use all that in the traumatic timeline in the treatment of it. But that the homeopathic remedy, the like cures like, it has the word cure in it. That's what we're talking about, cure with medicine. But the other, like, once the cure has been enacted, the body needs to still heal. Now, in some cases, it can do that on its own. We just naturally heal. Our body is always striving towards that point of healing and bringing all the parts together and making everything function properly. That's the job of our healing power. But in more severe circumstances, the body needs extra assistance. So yeah, we give the homeopathic remedies, but sometimes also to completely heal a trauma, the person will need additional modalities, whether that's body work, to help release things from the cellular memory, whether maybe that's a form of talk therapy or psychotherapy, just to help process and integrate the emotional content or psychological content. So between those two sides, the curing and the healing, the complete removal of the trauma will occur. But yeah, as I said, depending on the depth of the trauma, the nature of what happened, the nature of the person's health, and other factors, we're gonna get to some lesser or greater degree of how much therapy is needed along the way of that process. So I'm kind of speaking in general principles here, but yeah, just to make the point that yeah, like sometimes it is a fairly automatic thing. The body and the mind just kind of figures out how to heal itself, once we've removed that trauma with the remedy. Other times it will need a little more assistance. Okay, so let's move into the next little area here. And there was a question by letter A, the same letter A actually as above here, who asked, And why scant amounts function as doses. I'm sorry, that doesn't sound grammatically correct. I did copy and paste that out of the middle of a sentence, so that's on me because I didn't leave the whole sentence there. Anyways, so the question is really about. This is actually one of the most frequent questions in homeopathy. I get asked it a million different ways from patients and just from people in general, and I know why it's such a common question. And anyways, I'll spend a couple of moments on it. It's important. Like it's there's a reason it's a common question, and it's the this whole question. Now I'll give a slight more background. Again, I don't want to assume anyone who's listening does or doesn't know certain parts about homeopathy and homeopathic history and everything. The general, like, if you back up, like, even before Dr. Hahnemann, who founded the whole principles of homeopathic treatment, in the 1800s, if you even go before him, like before him into the history of medicine, the whole idea of similars, like we talked about the law of similars a second ago, the whole idea of similars in medicine has been known for pretty much as long as human civilization has existed. That's a very, very old base of knowledge in humanity. But the problem is, still is, and and this is what kind of formed the whole history of medicine in the sense that when somebody's suffering some form of disease, I showed you some of the categories just a moment ago, and you treat that disease with a similar medicine, like let's say you have a certain herbal medicine, some traditional medicine like that, and it has a high degree of similarity. Well, what people, and again, this was an empirical understanding, people just learned from experience that that was not a good idea, because but yes, it did the good thing that people wanted, which was to cure the disease. However, in that raw, crude form, when you take that herb, or other sort of natural medicine from nature in its natural crude form, it may be a similar, but because it's in its crude form, it's actually highly dangerous and even possibly deadly, right? So the whole empirical history of medicine before Hahnemann kind of knew this at one level. And so this is why we get, like, even still today, if you look at allopathic medicine today, if you look at even a lot of naturopathic medicine, you still get this strong tendency to, and it comes from this history, it comes from this deep human history, that we've kind of learned to be very careful, and even better, to avoid the law of similars, because it can be so dangerous and so deadly. As a history, as this kind of this grand human movement, allopathic medicine, naturopathic medicine, as I said, they avoid that law of similars. So they either use the law of opposites, or they use other things which are neither similars or opposites. But in any case, they've avoided the cure, they've avoided the law of similars. But there's a wisdom to that, because I say they're also avoiding the dangerous parts of the law of similars. So that's the whole background. And now we fast forward again to Dr. Hahnemann in the 1800s, he was certainly very aware of this history of medicine, but he but what he was also aware of, he was kind of in the age of this, this increasing tendency was growing in the medicine of his time, and in principle, it's still here now. That was becoming more and more damaging to humanity. Right, this was the age of all kinds of really strong, like chemistry was starting to be part of human knowledge, and that was becoming a little bit of the beginnings of pharmaceutical medicine kind of were happening then. You had a bloodletting, just a lot of really almost like violent medical approaches, which, even though they weren't similars, they were actually quite dangerous and deadly on their own right. So here Hahnemann was, he wasn't liking what he was seeing in terms of his colleagues, and all the, how badly patients were suffering from this so-called modern medicine of his time. And he was aware of the law of similars, but what he was starting to do, he was experimenting with giving smaller and smaller doses. He was just trying to prevent the problems of all the side effects and the big dangers we talked about with the law of similars. But to his surprise, to anyone's surprise, it's still, to us today, it's still kind of surprising when we first learn about this. As he was diminishing the dose, he was actually finding the medicines to become more effective and more safe. Like, it's almost like a paradox, but it's almost like to say and then he from there he further developed a really specific potentizing process where, I can talk a lot, about a lot of the details of that. I'll just kind of leave it to a basic point of it's essentially a process of serial dilution and succussion. Succussion is just like a vigorous banging or shaking, of a solution, a test tube, or a solution of something, of water mixed with something. So just that vigorous banging, as the opposite step to the dilution, we get this kind of potentizing or dynamizing effect. So it's not like if we just did the dilution, like, one drop in a million in the ocean or whatever. Well, now you just have a dilution. Now you just have like virtually nothing of something left. But when you put in that potentizing step, that's where you get this activation of the medicinal essence of, whatever that plant or whatever that substance was, excuse me, without the, what we can be prone to with the law of similars, which is all the side effects and the damaging effects. So anyways, that's a little bit of the history of Hahnemann and how he came to do that. As I say, he kind of came to it partially through, his rational understanding, but partially as just this very empirical kind of experimentation. He just was trying to figure it out. He just wanted a better method, right? Just like any of us, we try to find a better way to do something. So that's what he discovered practically, but it kind of, and let's see, did I also say anything in my bullet points? Yeah, no, essentially what I said is right here. And again, the next point here, so that's very practical, that's very empirical. We see the results. We have over 200 years of seeing the results of these potentized remedies and how actually powerful they are when it comes to chronic disease. And that's kind of the point of Heilkunst is, it's nice to get rid of, a simple headache or a bruise or something like that. But yeah, to really work on the deeper chronic diseases, that's where, we get the real power of Heilkunst, and this whole power and potency of the homeopathic medicines, the potentized medicines, is really the key to unlocking medicine in its full promise, really, of what it can and should be. So, as I said, I just wanted to give mainly a practical grounding there, but there is kind of a longer discussion. Maybe we can kind of set up a lecture just to talk about this kind of point. Like it can go very deep here, but really, the starting point has to do with, and this is what I was saying a couple of minutes ago. Why I think this is one of the most common questions asked about homeopathy is, well, how does that work? You're diluting the medicine, and there should be nothing left, and there shouldn't be any efficacy, and I understand that. I mean, I was there too when I was at the beginning, but why that's such a sticking point, and why it's such a difficult sticking point, is because we're all embedded in our current culture, which, is as I say here in a certain way, we're kind of living in a culture of the prejudice or the superstition of materialism. Now, just to be clear on that point, what I'm not saying is that there's no such thing as matter. Of course there is. I'm touching my computer right now, and I'm touching my desk, and everything we see around us is all matter. Our bodies, we see it everywhere. It's all around us. But why I call it a superstition? Because the true foundation of nature, and especially when we get into the life sciences, human health, and what is the energy and the structure of living things and all of this. Yes, they contain matter, but the function of life, the development of life, how does a sperm and an egg develop into this whole life form? Well, you can't explain that materially. You have to understand this broader reality of what is life energy, what is life function, and how does it, rather than trying to find who breathed, like the people in science talk about trying to go back to understanding the Big Bang, and then fast forward, where did life begin? But they're always doing that from the point of view of considering that matter is primary, where matter is just an outgrowth of this deeper, what I'm talking about, the functions of life energy, and how it functions through different, what I say here, primal forces, powers, energies. Like that primal reality is really what gives birth to matter. So yes, we can run around and measure matter and touch it, and kind of have all these scientific processes and measurements about it, which is fine at one level. But to really understand life and health and everything, all the goals we have in Heilkunst, you cannot get the answers you're looking for if you begin and end with matter. So, anyways, this could be such a much longer discussion, and it could be a very interesting discussion. As I say, we'll look to set some specific lecture up just about that. We can spend an hour or two and really dig out some of the deeper philosophy and science behind all this. But I'm kind of saying it in this sketchy form right now, just to say I know why people have this as their most common question. Like because we can't help but think of everything in material terms. We're in this very material time of history, time of human consciousness, and that's just the natural way we see things. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But as I say, hopefully I'm planting a seed which you realize has to kind of sprout and grow up into a much bigger plant than just what we can say in a couple of minutes about it. But yeah, it certainly gets to the heart of why so many people either have trouble understanding how homeopathy can work, or they just simply refuse to believe it. They just put it aside and say no, that's nonsense or whatever. Well, unfortunately, the clinical results say otherwise. But anyways, let people be what they need to be and think what they need to think. But as far as getting deeper into Heilkunst, this is certainly the beginnings of where philosophical reflections have to go on those kinds of questions. So let me just clean up my bullet points here. And let me just quickly do a check-in. Yeah, so everything seems to be running just fine. Okay, so that came out of the second of the three jurisdictions. So let's continue on to the number three. And again, like I just said, with the philosophy of what is a homeopathic remedy, how does it work, and what is the deeper philosophical understanding of why that works, that we're not just in a world of material things, but the material is in a world of kind of a broader matrix, so to speak, of these powers, forces, energies. As I was saying, that can be a much longer discussion. This whole third area of Heilkunst, I'm going to give maybe a couple of minutes here, but again, this is one of these ones where we would need at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours just to introduce this area. Like it's truly the vastest area. But I'll just give a few sketch points here. So yeah, when we get into therapeutic education, so where we had the law of opposites in regimen, the law of similars in medicine, in the third jurisdiction, now we're dealing with the law of truth. And now that sounds almost pretentious at one level. Well, whose truth, and who's going to tell somebody what the truth is? And I understand those kinds of reactions to that. But regardless of who's the teacher and who's trying to help somebody else with finding the truth or whatever, it doesn't matter in the end. Each one of us on our own has that responsibility to ourselves, right? We're all, you can say that's kind of one of the main points of life, is to work through our illusions and delusions and other conflicts and so on, where we can more and more for ourselves kind of uncover the truth. Now that's difficult. We have doubts, we have confusions, and well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I understand that for sure. But I think probably everyone here on the call today can have some experience, something they can relate to in that they've experienced at some point, where something just becomes so clear, like even one little tiny little thing so true to you, even if everything else in the world is still confusing to you. If one thing becomes like crystal clear, and that ring of truth is just ringing loud and clear, as they say, it's like those moments of, you can say, revelation, not to go off on the deeper meaning of that word, but just that personal kind of experiential meaning, where it's like you can't deny. And actually, you know what, this is something, again, anyone listening to this right now, if you've experienced Heilkunst already, any number of us have had some experience through the Heilkunst treatments where your health is in some certain condition, be it a symptom picture, whatever it is. You take a remedy, whether that's homeopathic or homotonic, and something very distinct and very unmissable changes in you. You can't go back to the before of that, where before you would have said, well, I don't know if how these remedies work, if they work, and how could they work, and what we were just talking about with the potentization. But once you have that a profound, real living experience of something like that, nobody, nothing can ever take that away again, because there's something so revelatory, as the word I was using, in that personal experience, that it's kind of becomes a grounding in itself, that maybe other truths, other perspectives can start to grow out of that. But as I say, I'm not saying that this is an easy area. It's not easy to find your own orientation in the world and truth and things like that. But what is a given, there is a difference between what's true and what's false. Again, whether we know that in a given example or not, that's another question. But the fact that something is true or it isn't is just simply a fact. Like you can't. I know a lot of modern academia has all these arguments, say, oh, there is no such thing as truth, and da da da. Anyways, that's, as I say, this could be a whole long discussion on its own. I don't want to really go all the way down that rabbit hole, as interesting as it is. But for the practical purposes of Heilkunst medicine and treatments and everything, some of my basic points here, we can talk about the mind-body disconnect. Let's say even we even know people like this, perhaps in people in your life or whoever, that are they're just kind of let's say they're kind of awkward and discoordinated. Maybe they're always kind of stumbling around and bumping into things and knocking things off of tables or whatever. Like, they just don't seem to have this really good mind-body integration. That could be for different reasons. Again, in the person, whoever you're thinking of, you may know what their reasons are in terms of their life, their emotional traumas or things they've gone through or whatever. But just to say, that's just a broad, rough example, but just to start getting us into thinking about this third area. The other one is what we would call psychosomatic caused illness. So, someone, let's say they have a certain stress or anxiety on their mind, and they think about that so obsessively, so intensively, they actually literally make something physically sick. They give themselves, like indigestion or something. They can't digest their food properly because there's so much stress that they keep putting into their whole digestive tract, which is getting, like, we're only supposed to be putting food down our digestive tract, but they're also throwing stress down there, and that's interfering with the natural digestive function. So anyway, that's a very basic example, but just again to open a little bit of that thinking process. And we have now another question from letter S, and I put it in here because it adds to this discussion point here. S says, in what ways does Heilkunst treatment assist your patients on this journey? And by the way, I had to copy and paste. She was referring to her own previous question, the journey of untangling of self and being able to reclaim our true self, our authentic, God-created self. So what I put in my own point form notes to answer that is ultimately all of Heilkunst leads up to this, leads up to the answer to this question. And all of it being all three jurisdictions, right? All of regimen, all of medicine, all of education, step by step by step, you start clearing all these imbalances and blockages and so forth from the patient. And more they come to this higher question in their own health and their own mind is, am I being my true self? Am I living my authentic life? Are my relationships true? Am I kind of connecting to the people around me in a meaningful way, versus am I kind of going through the motions? Am I doing a job that I hate? And, do I have this blockage in my life? Do I have this or that or whatever? I'm saying this in a very pragmatic way, but these are the kinds of questions that first come out of this question. But yes, we can kind of go higher and higher up the levels into more of, you could say, human development, psychological development, spiritual development, if that's an aspect that you acknowledge, as part of your life or whatever. This is the higher and higher we go up in this level of what happens after we removed all the lower blockages. So, and actually there's a further point, the same letter S, and I embedded that question here as well. The question is about anger and rage as a general topic, and then the particular questions are, how can these strong emotions be used as fuel to assist in the healing process and transformation? And how can someone assist that process to move oneself forward? So the first, again, this is the deeper you go into Heilkunst, the longer the answers get, but I will try to stay as short form as I can, as pragmatic as I can here. Yeah, we'll kind of point to and touch on some bigger questions here, but this question on, well, there's a few interwoven questions here, but the topic of anger and rage. The first thing we have to say is that there is actually a difference between anger and rage. I know in everyday language and common speak, we use those words interchangeably, and it's fair enough at one level. But if we're going to get really specific and technical about therapy and Heilkunst and what's going on with someone's healing and what is anger versus rage, like what do we mean by saying they're different and what is the difference? So the way I approach that, and again, keeping this as concise as possible for what would be a really big topic, is when you look at the whole physiology of the human being, ultimately, let me just grab a sip of water here. Every human being essentially is not a single human being, but each one of us is a double human being. And even if you look at our physiology and our nervous system, you can even start to see that like interpenetrating duality of the autonomic nervous system compared to the central nervous system. It's almost like if you're looking at a forest or whatever, you see two trees that are close together, they might have interwoven together. Well, that's sort of like our physiology. We have these, what we call these two beings, these two human beings, which have these very different physiological processes that interweave together. Another way of saying that, it's like we have a lower self and a higher self, that gets a little bit more into a psychological or a spiritual concept of the two beings at that level. And why I'm giving you this rough framework, again, there could be a lot more, but just keep those two beings in mind. The upper being, what I just referred to, the upper and the lower being. The upper being is the one who can be prone to anger. That's kind of, the upper being kind of has that waking conscious mind. Kind of like what I was saying earlier about empiricism. We just go through our life, and we just empirically figure things out. We have experiences. We encounter other people. We have discussions or whatever. But we're just kind of empirically going through our life. But things may stir up anger in us. We don't like what somebody said, or something frustrated us in our day. Whatever it is, we have this kind of anger. And anger on its own is it can be more or less intense, but it's qualitatively it's entirely different from rage. I'll come to rage as a definition in a second, but that anger is just more that immediate kind of waking reactivity to things. Somebody peed you off, or they they got as I said a second ago, they said something you didn't like. They said something about you, like they said something not nice about you. So we get kind of our ego identity kind of caught up, and it's like, oh, well, he's insulted me and I'm so offended. And so anyway, I'm not putting that down. Like, those are natural reactions, and we do have those reactions, and we should have those reactions. But I'm just kind of setting that up to kind of get into the what's the difference with rage. Well, as I said, with these two beings, the rage is a function of that nether being. So that nether being is not what I just said. The upper being is that waking, conscious mind going around the world, like having experiences, processing things, using language, in that everyday kind of navigating the world and people kind of way. The rage of the nether being, that nether being is more that unconscious, but it's a very deep consciousness, and it's inside of that is all of our unresolved traumas, all of our even genetic content, which can be both physical as well as emotional. Like, it's really like when they talk about the tip of the iceberg. Well, that's kind of what rage is. It's kind of the bottom of the iceberg, right? It's this deep well of this, all these things that kind of provide content and energy to our waking consciousness. But by and large, the waking consciousness is not very conscious of that material. So yes, they may have those anger responses, as I said, but when a real rage response comes out, that's where like a much deeper blockage has kind of been hit at that point. And where, like the example I gave for the anger, it may be somebody has offended our sense of our identity or something. If they called us a name or whatever, or told us we're dumb or whatever it is, they've insulted us. That's kind of that upper identity. But what the rage has more to do with this much like the much deeper life energy that really kind of runs our whole body, runs our whole system, runs our whole mind, as it were. But that deeper flow of life energy, when it gets interfered with, um, and let me try to think of an example here. But it's kind of like, um, when we kind of have this deeper drive for something. Actually, let's take here. I'll put it this way. This will make it more vivid. Like some of our deeper life drives. We have a drive, for food and for hunger, for reproduction, so on and so forth. Like these are deep life drives. And if someone or something gets in the way when we're on the way to fulfilling one of those, that's where more of a rage response could come out. Like rage is just more pure, like muscular, uh, kinetic energy that kind of gets blocked in us by some kind of external blockage, and then it kind of has to overcome that blockage with an excess, more than normal amount of force. So that's more the rage response, right? So again, in practical everyday life, we may not think of the difference between those. If somebody's mad at us, we're not thinking, oh, are they angry or are they enraged? But we're just trying to solve the problem that just happened or whatever. But yeah, physiologically they're very different. So more to the point of this question, this was under the question of coming into our true self and everything. Well, at this deeper level of, well, what is that true self and what is it supposed to be doing? What are we supposed to be doing in our life? Are we living our true life and all these things? At that higher level, if someone or some circumstance is getting in the way of your life going where it's supposed to go, as far as who you truly are, then that's what you kind of be either low level or fully explosive. Degree of rage anywhere in between can kind of be coming out at that level of our physiology. So to also to the other part of this question, how can we kind of bring this into the therapeutic process? Well, many ways, but one, I'll just give one example. One is if at the right time in someone's treatment, if that, like in the safe place, when you have like the safety of the consult room and what's happening in the treatment and everything, that kind of safe space between the patient and the practitioner, if that rage response can kind of intentionally be invoked at a safe level, but where that you can get that energy flowing, that can kind of dislodge a blockage that's gotten stuck inside someone's physiology. So as I said, there can be a very, very broad area of therapeutics we can talk about. I just want to give you a few practical examples so we start getting pictures of things. We can start talking about a common set of images and a common set of concepts and what we actually mean here. But yeah, that's the rough starting point where we would start to position anger and rage and where they can start to come into the therapeutic process. Okay, so let me back myself up to my bullet points here. Um, okay, so we have a next little bundle of questions, and I put it under the category of what I call false condition labels versus true diagnosis. Let me just grab another sip. Okay, so letter N asks, are there any suggestions for rheumatoid arthritis? And actually, I grouped that together with letter E, who asked, I have a newborn and was wondering if there are any home remedies for gas and constipation for babies. So, kind of a similar category of question. And let me get into a little bit of details with each one. So, the first thing, like at this conceptual level, this distinction I'm making are that what we usually accept as a diagnosis is, from a doctor or something, is actually not really a diagnosis. It's what I would call a false condition label. And so, rheumatoid arthritis is a classic example of that. You may get you may put 10,000 people into a study or whatever who have that label, and this is actually what the whole pharmaceutical world does. They design these drug trials and these double blind experiments, just to try a drug with a given condition. The problem is, I mean, this is the first problem. There's other problems. The main problem is at this level, is this so-called label of rheumatoid arthritis is not a universal thing. Like if you, as I say, you have 1,000 or 10,000 people with that label, you have you have 10,000 different medical cases, which have different, different causes of what's caused that in them, and different imbalances, different things that have gone on in their health history. And if you just try to get that one pill that's going to solve the problem for all of them, you're going to create a mess in at least 9,999 of them, if not all 10,000, right? Because you're just approaching this abstract condition label versus what I'm calling the true diagnosis or the true disease. And if you remember from up above when we talked about the three jurisdictions, regimen, medicine, and education, this in this medicine realm, you need true diagnosis to find out, well, what's that true disease, right? So someone who has rheumatoid arthritis may have one or many diseases, like in the sense I'm using the word disease, and each one of those needs to be treated correctly with the law of similar remedy that matches that disease. So again, whether that's one or 12 different diseases underneath their rheumatoid arthritis, that's what it is for them, but it's not going to be the same for the next person. So anyways, that's the first thing we have to talk about. If somebody is looking at the label rheumatoid arthritis, um, that doesn't have much meaning until until you're very specifically diagnosing one person with that label. The label doesn't really matter much, other than sometimes it's an okay starting point to begin the diagnosis process. But yeah, the diagnosis doesn't end with that label; it can begin with it at best. So yeah. So once you have that one individual, now we can individualize their diagnosis. Um, and as I mentioned, the three jurisdictions above, it may not just be diseases which are behind that. They may have imbalances. Maybe they're not properly hydrated. Maybe they're lacking a certain mineral. Maybe, we could look at all these chronic nutritional deficiencies they may be suffering, and that may be contributing a lot. There's switching back into the medicine jurisdiction again. And actually, I know this just from experience. A lot of the time, there's a lot in that medicine realm, especially at the genetic level. And we're actually going to come into this in the next question in a couple of minutes. But the question of the chronic miasms or the genetic inheritances, that's often, almost all the time actually, a very huge part of what's behind rheumatoid arthritis. So, maybe there was heart disease in the family, maybe there was, other forms of arthritis, maybe there was, other musculoskeletal issues, maybe there was even other, completely different conditions, but under these certain given chronic miasms, they come out as this particular label of rheumatoid arthritis in this person. So, anyways, just to say, I have to speak. Obviously, we're not talking about one specific person or case right here. So, if we were, then we could be going into their whole history and pointing out all their details. I'm just giving possibilities here, and we don't know until we get into the diagnosis with an actual person. So anyway, so that's the first part of this question, and then taking the other question from letter E. I already read the question about the newborn with gas and constipation. So same thing, we have to say everything I just said. You have to do a true diagnosis, and we have the three jurisdictions, and gas and constipation, that may be a condition, but we don't know, like, are there imbalances, are there disease, everything I just said. And now to get a little more practical, oh yeah, the other thing too, like when we're dealing with a baby or an infant, like often, of course, we're dealing with a situation of nursing or breastfeeding. And so the diagnosis has to kind of expand out to not just the baby, but also the mother, because not just, not just the nutrition and the milk is passing through the breast milk, but the whole mother's, life force, the energy, the even the state of mind, and all the things we talked about in the other realms of the diagnosis. The mother is often very much passing that along to the baby. So who needs the remedy is kind of the first question. Do we give the mother, do we give the baby, or both? Like, where's the source of the problem? So yeah, not only the three jurisdictions, but here we also have the two individuals that are kind of potentially both contributing to where these symptoms are coming from. So just a couple of examples from the homeopathic materia medica. Lycopodium can be a commonly used remedy for gas, as well as constipation. The colocynthis, there's a range of other ones, but again, until we kind of do a really, really specific diagnosis of this baby, kind of ask a lot more questions and know the whole history and everything. Like, I'm just giving a generic example here. I'm just speaking of the universal gassy baby. I don't know, this particular baby. It's actually not my patient, it's Allison. So I actually don't even have the case in my head. But so anyways, just to give you a couple of pragmatic examples, as I said, the remedies like lycopodium or cholecystitis can be very high on the list of what we might find, or there can be some other ones as well. And again, as I also said, is it a nutritional imbalance? Is there some other history between that mother and the baby? Maybe there was mastitis or some other interference to the breastfeeding that kind of disrupted the energy, which may have been a kind of an interruption to the child's natural digestive process. Again, I don't know what it is in this particular case. I'm just giving some of the generic situations that we have treated, where we've seen the solution go off in this direction or that direction, depending on what the case was. So. Okay, so that is that for that category. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be coming into this next question on the chronic miasms, and letter G asks actually a really excellent block of questions here. I reproduced them in their entirety just for your interest's sake. I'm actually I'm not going to answer them in their fullness here. Like this would be another one that would be a good 2-hour lecture just on its own. But I'm going to pull out just some of the basic outline here, and just keep your eye on your email. I will be doing this in the near future. We're going to go more deeply on the chronic miasms. Actually, Allison will be doing that lecture with me. So it's something we do every so often. It's a really good topic. It's a really fundamental topic. But as I say, I'll just give a few of the basic points and history here. And let's start with the word miasm. Even in Hahnemann's lifetime and his medical training and all the rest of it, the word miasm, like the way he came to make a distinction, like I'm using this word here, chronic miasm. Well, before he discovered the chronic miasms, he and the whole history of medicine really has been working with acute miasm. Well, what's an acute miasm? It's really just an infectious disease. The influenza, chickenpox, measles, like all these infectious diseases are what we call acute miasms. And so as I say, that's well known. Humanity has been dealing with infections since the beginning of time, and medicine has been dealing with them, and all the different treatments. Even now today, the allopathic treatments for infection, the naturopathic. It's a big part of medicine. It's a big part of human physiology and health and everything, just because of what it is. But this was the great genius of Hahnemann. In the last few years of his life, he took what everyone knew, acute miasms or infections, and he discovered another kind of miasm, another category of miasm, which no one had ever done before. And his discovery actually is one of the greatest discoveries in all of the history of medicine. It's one of the greatest, in his life alone, but it really is one of the greatest in all of the history of medicine. And that is, we don't just have these simple infections, like the way we understand infections still today, but this deeper chronic miasm is actually a genetic factor. So what anything that was once an infection can, at a certain point in time, in a person's history, and then later what becomes the genetic history in their children and so on, becomes a chronic miasm, where it becomes a more persistent, something that you almost can't get rid of. It just becomes so engrafted into the family genetics and into the deeper health of all the individuals in that family, that unlike an infection, it comes and goes within a relatively short time, usually. A normal simple infection. But the chronic miasms, this deeper form of where these infections can go, is not so simple anymore. This is what we deal with, like 95% of the time in Heilkunst treatment is, people don't have simple acute issues. They have these deep chronic issues. They've come through their family tree, through the genetics. They've come through, some of the shocks and traumas, the timeline kinds of treatments I said earlier. But these deeper chronic miasms, as I say, was a great discovery of Dr. Hahnemann's. And they, and actually what was so great about it in terms of his own life, and everything he had done in terms of medicine and discovering homeopathy, all the way up to that point in his life, was itself, he had done a lot of good. He had helped a lot of patients, overcome symptom pictures and overcome even semi-chronic issues or whatever. But he came to like this brick wall, so to speak, where more and more he started to discover as as he went through with patients, into improving their health and giving them these homeopathic remedies, that it was a brick wall that he didn't know how to get past it. He was really stuck at it, and this brick, he didn't know what it was. We know now the brick wall was the chronic miasms, but before he knew what it was just like, well, it's like people generally respond to these homeopathic remedies. It gets rid of the symptoms. It has the desired effect. People feel better and so on and so forth. But then sometime later, for some people, either those symptoms would come back again, which is troubling. If you found the law of cure in nature, like cures like, then doesn't wouldn't cure mean that something is gone forever? So you would think and hope it means that, but and it did actually for a lot of his patients. But then this other group of patients, this brick wall, as I'm calling it, well, these symptoms would come back, or a different set of symptoms would come back, and he actually spent some of his final years really, really deeply studying this problem, in studying his patients, studying medical history, looking at other cases in the history of medicine that can give him some clues. And this is what he came to: these chronic miasms. Now we're at this much deeper level than the infections that I first started talking about. So the chronic miasms, as I said, they're inherited in the family tree. So even a cute little innocent baby that was just born a week ago or a month ago or whatever, um, we look at them as so pure and innocent and healthy. Oh yeah, they're in their perfect health, and they're these perfect little beings. And of course they're cute on top of it all. But yeah, we have this idea, but what we're missing, again, back to the what's not what's the tip of the iceberg and what's below the surface. Well, all of us, all babies, are born with these deep, deep miasms that have come from human history, but now they just come back up again, one person at a time, in whatever form they happen to manifest in that person. So anyways, this is Hahnemann's great discovery, and it's not just discovering that these exist, but actually it helps him to adapt what he had already done with using homeopathic remedies to now use them in this kind of deeper form of treatment and actually get to the cure for these people, which he seemed to fail to do up to that point. And he was baffled. He couldn't understand what was going wrong. But so there you are. So that's the very brief introduction to the miasms. It's a really, really key part of Heilkunst treatment. Like, yes, we can clear the shocks and the traumas in someone's timeline and their headaches and this, that, and the other thing. But until we get into really relieving their life force of these deeper miasms, they're not going to have the most robust health. The further somebody goes in their life, like through the years and the decades and everything, the more and more these underlying miasms start to, rear their ugly head, as the cliche goes. So yeah, this is one of the ultimate parts of Heilkunst treatment, is you getting all the way through the timeline, getting to the chronic miasms, and kind of really relieving the patient's life force of these very deep and old things. Like, they're not just your parents and grandparents, but how many generations back can we imagine? It's like, well, like it's like, if you think of the math of that, right? Everyone has two parents, four grandparents, eight great grandparents, and every time you go back a generation, it doubles. So that's exponential, right? So it's not long before you start to realize that your genetic inheritance has in very, very short order, has thousands of ancestors that are all built into your genetics, as far as their diseases and even their traumas and emotions. Like, we see that too in Heilkunst. So anyways, that's just the broad introduction, the brief introduction. But yeah, come back soon. As I say, we'll be doing a lecture on the miasms. Like, we'll go through each one and show the symptoms that are in a given family tree. Like, we can look at like the heart disease one, which is very common. We could look at the cancer one. Like, we'll go through all of them and give a lot more detail to these. I just wanted to give you a sense of what we're talking about. What are these chronic miasms? And as I say, this letter G asks a really good set of questions, and we will be including these when we come back to that lecture in a few weeks. So let me see. Okay, so there is, and actually, actually going to take this down off of my display here. I'm going to keep looking at it myself, and let me just remove this. I just can't remember what I have in my bullet points here. But yeah, the next topic is, again, it's one that um, it's one I can't even tell you what it is in plain language, in direct language, and that's because because on Facebook, because on YouTube, there are there are certain topics that they don't like people talking about. I'll just leave it at that. But you'll know what I'm talking about in a second. Like it's this the last 2 years, this great worldwide health issue that's been happening. You all know what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to say the word because that we've already had warnings on our various social media channels. So I'm going to be a good boy, and I'm going to I'm going to put the censor tape over my own mouth, and I'm not going to say the words. But anyway, just to give some general indications, I had a few questions from different people that came up about this big worldwide health situation in terms of some of the medical options and some of the reactions people have had, and some of the preventions that people are trying to do. So again, I can't say too much about this here, but we are going to, like I just mentioned, we will be doing a lecture on the miasms in the near future. Well, this other big topic we will also be doing, but first we kind of have to find and set up a more suitable video platform that isn't the same as the one we're using. Basically, we need to be able to speak where I can say the words that I need to say, and without worrying of being censored and having my channel erased, and all these kinds of things. So anyways, just as I said, sorry if I'm being so vague right now, but I think you all understand what I'm saying. I hope I haven't been too vague and lost you along the way. But anyways, it's something that will be coming, not exactly on this channel, but yeah, we will let you know how to link up with when we do that kind of talk. Let me see. I'm back to my bullet points just to finish up. Any last things? Oh yeah, and I'm kind of on a similar thing. This would be its own separate thing. Letter E asked if there's any chance that I'd like to do a lecture on crypto. Things are heating up. And that's also a similarly interesting question. I mean, that would be its own separate topic. And again, the answer is yes. I will be doing something like that. Again, it will be most likely on one of those alternative platforms, like I'm just saying. But yeah, it does fit into Heilkunst in a certain way. It fits into health, but this really gets into the health of how you can live the world around you, in your society, understand kind of what's happening, how to protect yourself. Like that's definitely a part of health, just as far as having that kind of true understanding of what the world is and how you're going to find a more healthy relationship to it. Anyways, I'm saying that in a generic way, but we will bring that discussion over to a future platform and a future discussion space. Um, Now, there were a few other leftover questions, but I didn't fold them into the formal part of my bullet points. But I do think, I'm just kind of glancing through them one more time, I do think we've more or less touched on everything today, everything that was submitted in terms of questions. But I'm certainly, I'm open to be here for another few minutes. If anyone wants to put in another question, you can just type it into your Facebook or YouTube comment box. It'll show up right here in my studio. But yeah, or if you just even want to clarify, anything we've already talked about today, or kind of add another point or clarification on something I said. As I say, I will leave this open for at least another couple of minutes. As I say, I know there's a 30-second delay between my words and between when you hear them, so I will leave this pregnant pause. I'll leave this moment for you to, if anyone's typing in a question or anything like that. But yeah, otherwise, as far as the uh, the questions I had submitted, as I said, I more or less covered the whole scope of what was in the content of all of those. And yeah, as I say, leaving these last final moments. As I say, I am still open if a question comes through, but I'm being respectful of the time delay that they put into these broadcasts. And oh, here's a good delay tactic. I'll have a sip of water. The other, and actually, I was just mentioning finding alternative places to do videos, for the reasons I explained. For the very same reason, we're going to be branching out more and more into some of the alternative social media platforms. And we will announce specifically in our newsletter, like, if we're starting to do more on certain platforms. Like, we're already in different places. We're on, we're on MeWe, and I forget all the ones right now off the top of my head, but yeah, we are going to more and more put more of the the real important content that we can't talk about here. We'll be more of the good little boys and girls over on the mainstream platforms, but we'll bring the real big guns out on the other platforms. So anyways, I will leave it at that. Keep your eyes on your on emails from us on our social media platforms. We're going to be doing a lot more of these regularly. I already mentioned the miasm topic and some other potential topics. And on that point too, if there is a much broader topic that you'd like us to tackle, you can certainly submit that as a question by email or otherwise. And yeah, we could either figure out the structure to present that ourselves, or um, you bring in a suitable guest, whatever the topic is. Oh, and look, by my by my by my delays, I actually did give someone time to type a question. So the question says, um, okay, I'll just read it. It says, what is the purpose of waiting for 2 weeks after the latest wafer disc or powder to schedule the following video conference? Generally, if I'm understanding the question correctly, the whether we're talking about 2 weeks or any kind of timing between one remedy set and another, it's the purpose is actually, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but I did not define it very directly. But I'm gonna pull on a point we talked about earlier, and that is, there's a difference in the whole process. For each remedy and every step of the way, there's a difference between curing and healing, right? And the curing is what the homeopathic remedy does. That's the like cures like. That's the cure part of that. The like cures like. The homeopathic remedy, it enacts that curative action for the patient, whatever specific thing we're addressing, and that's fairly quick, almost instantaneous. That's a very very short a very short physiological process. But then the long process is the healing, and that can be any what we call the healing reaction. I didn't talk too much about that today. That's actually one of the big questions that didn't come in today. But the healing reaction compared to the curing action, which is very almost instantaneous, virtually no time, the healing reaction can be minutes or days or hours, or even up to a week or two, or depending on what's being cleared, how deep that shock or trauma was, or whatever we're treating. That healing reaction can be longer, and that really starts to dictate why we put certain gaps, sometimes days, sometimes 2 weeks, whatever the case is. We kind of pre-program the patient to wait a certain amount of time before they do another remedy. So that's, if I'm answering your question. If you meant something a little bit different, you can maybe type a little more, but I hope that's kind of getting to the essence of what your question was. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, I know you're all there, and there are people, sitting on their computers. You're hearing me and you're looking at me, but it is at another level. This is such a bizarre experience. I'm just kind of I'm in an empty room, alone in a room, and I'm looking at my camera on my computer, and pretending I'm talking to people. But yeah, I guess this could be diagnosed as a kind of mental illness when you really think about it. Okay, so I got confirmation that that was the right answer to the question. So okay, so I will perhaps say this is a good time. We can let it rest. Oh, actually, in my clock, my time zone, it's almost about to turn 2:22. So that's a lot of repeated numbers. That's a lot of fun. So thank you on at 2:22. It was a pleasure to. Well, I didn't see you all, but I felt you all, and I, having this experience with you. And I will see you the next time that we boot up one of these lectures.